You ask me about the trenches. You want to know what a horrific day there was like. Actually, my friend, there wasn't a single day that wasn't horrific. But the most horrific thing wasn't the gunfire nor the trigger. The real horror. It came from the silence. It came from the bone-chilling cold that seeped into your spine as you stood rooted to the spot in the muddy, blood-soaked cesspool. Let me tell you about my 142nd day at the Somme. The day I realized hell isn't underground. We dug it ourselves right here on the surface. 4 a.m. It wasn't the sergeant's whistle that woke me, but a rat. It was the size of a kitten, its fur soaking wet and sticky crawling across my face. I could feel its sharp claws digging into the cracked skin on my cheek. It wasn't afraid of me. Why should it be? Here they were, the masters. We were just fresh meat waiting to rot. I pushed it away, but I didn't have the strength to feel disgusted anymore. My body was numb. It had rained heavily last night. The cold in northern France was unlike anywhere else. It was a damp, persistent cold. Rainwater mixed with urine feces, and even the fragments of bodies of someone shelled last week, all forming a thick, muddy mess that reached our knees. We slept standing, sitting, leaning against the damp, moldy earthen walls that people euphemistically called trenches. The first thing that assaulted my nostrils upon waking was a foul stench. You can't imagine it. Don't even try to imagine it. It was the acrid smell of sulfurous gunpowder, the smell of rotting wood, the smell of garbage, and most intensely of all, the sickeningly sweet smell of decaying human flesh. It clung to my clothes, my hair, to every rock-hard biscuit we ate. No matter how many times you washed your hands, that stench of death lingered on your fingertips. Stand to stand to. The sergeant's hoarse shout echoed along the winding trench. It was the morning ritual. The hour before sunrise was the most dangerous time. That was when the Germans usually attacked. The dim darkness was the perfect cloak for bayonets and grenades. I grabbed my Lee Enfield rifle. It was ice cold. I'd had to wrap cloth around the bolt to keep the mud from getting in. If the gun jams, you die. It's that simple. I stood on the firing platform, my chest pressed against the soaking wet sandbag. Beside me was Thomas. He was 19, having arrived 3 days earlier to replace Jones, who had been shot in the head while trying to write home. Thomas trembled, not from the cold, but from fear. I could hear his teeth chattering. "Are you okay, kid?" I whispered, my eyes still fixed on the gray mist ahead. The place called No Man's Land. "I can't see anything," Thomas replied. His voice choked. "Just fog. That's what fear is. You look at that fog and your imagination starts killing you. Is that dark shadow a charred tree or a German soldier crawling toward you? Is that rustling sound the wind or the cutting of barbed wire?" We stood there for an hour, eyes strained, hands numb on the triggers. The silence was so heavy I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Each second felt like an eternity, waiting for death. Sometimes it was worse than death itself. The sun began to rise, pale and weak. There had been no attacks this morning. The order to stand down was given. The entire trench breathed a long sigh of relief, a white cloud of steam rising from hundreds of foul-smelling, starving mouths. Now it was time to face the second enemy, hunger and thirst. Breakfast was passed down. Don't expect much. A cup of hot tea, the only thing that comforted us. But it reeked of gasoline. They'd used gasoline cans to carry water without cleaning them, but we drank it anyway. We drank it as if it were fine wine because at least it was warm. And the food, hard biscuits. We called them toothbreakers. It was so hard you'd have to pound it against a rifle butt or soak it in tea to eat it. But this morning, when I broke my piece of bread in half, I saw tiny black dots inside. Weevils. Sputtering white weevils. Thomas looked at his bread and felt like throwing up. "Eat it," I said curtly. "There's protein in it. Close your eyes and eat it." Here, pickiness is a death sentence. You need energy to dig, to run, and to kill. Thirst is worse. Clean water is a luxury. There were times when the supply lines were cut off by shelling, and we had to drink from bomb craters. Do you know what color bomb crater water is? Green. And if you look down at that green film, sometimes you'll see a hand or a swollen face staring back at you. But when your throat is parched like a desert, you push the corpse aside and drink. That's when you know you're no longer human. You are an animal trying to survive. Around 9 a.m. SM. The sun rose a little higher, dispelling some of the fog. This was when the German snipers began their work. We had a golden rule: never stick your head higher than the sandbag. But humans are always curious, or sometimes just careless for a split second. To my left, about 5 meters away, a group of new recruits were trying to repair a collapsed section of the trench. A young man named Miller tiredly straightened his back to stretch. He'd forgotten. He'd forgotten where he was. "Duck down." I hadn't finished shouting. Bang! A dry, sharp sound rang out. Not as loud as a cannonball, it sounded more like a whip lashing through the air. Miller didn't fall backward. He collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. A tiny hole in the middle of his forehead, neat and clean. But the back of his head, well, I won't describe it in detail. You just need to know that the trench wall behind him was stained red. There were no screams, no last words. One moment he was complaining about his wet shoes, the next he was a lifeless corpse. Death here is so cheap and quick you don't have time to feel sad. Thomas stared at the corpse, his face drained of all color. I pulled him down to a kneeling position. "Don't look," I hissed. "Search his pockets. Get the ammunition and see if there's any letter to send to his mother. Then push the corpse to the side alley." I saw the horror in Thomas's eyes. He looked at me as if I were a monster. "Aren't you sad that's Miller?" "Sad?" I laughed a crooked laugh. "Save your tears, kid. It's only 9 a.m. The day is still long." And just as I said, that was only the beginning. The real terror doesn't come from the scattered sniper bullets. It comes from the sky. Can you hear it? The whistling sound from afar. Do you know what the sound of hell is like? It's not a scream. It's a continuous rumble of thunder, the roar of thousands of tons of steel tearing through the sky. The Germans called it Trommelfeuer, drum fire. We called it steel rain. And when it starts, you're no longer a soldier, you're no longer a man. You're just a mole trying to burrow deep into the earth, begging God, whom you've long forgotten, to let the bullet hit someone else, not you. 10 a.m. The shelling began. The ground shook so violently that I felt my teeth chattering as if they were about to shatter. Dust rained down from the trench walls covering us. The air was sucked out, replaced by the thick, burning smell of gunpowder. Boom, 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 the explosions were incessant. Not a moment of silence. My ears were ringing. Blood started to trickle from my nose. I looked over at Thomas. He was curled up at the bottom of the trench, his hands clutching his head, his knees drawn up to his chest. His eyes were wide, staring blankly into space, muttering something incoherently, but I couldn't hear it. I leaned closer to his ear. "Mom, Mom, I want to go home. Mom." He kept repeating it like a broken machine. It was shell shock. His mind had shattered before his body. A shell landed in this trench about 20 meters from us. Earth rocks, wood chips, and pieces of limbs flew up into the air like fireworks. A warped helmet rolled to my feet. A piece of scalp was still inside. I didn't vomit. I just kicked the helmet aside and continued pressing myself against the earthen wall. You know, in moments like these, you become cruelly selfish. You don't think about victory, honor, or country. You just think, don't be me, don't be me. After 4 hours, the artillery suddenly fell silent. The silence was so sudden it hurt my ears more than the explosions. But make no mistake, this wasn't peace. This was a sign. The artillery had stopped firing so the infantry could attack. Or worse, so we could attack. Basebands, prepare to charge. The captain's yell ripped through the silence. My heart stopped. It was our turn. We were the ones who had to climb out of this safe ground and run into the meat grinder. I turned to Thomas, slapping him hard on the cheek to bring him back to reality. Get up, kid. It's time. Thomas looked at me, tears streaming down his face, smearing it with coal dust. I can't walk. My legs. I can't get up. I grabbed his collar and shook him violently. Listen, Thomas, if you stay here, the officer will shoot you for desertion. If you climb up there, you have a chance of survival. Do you want to die a coward or die trying to get home? Get up. I thrust the gun into his hand. His hand trembled so much he couldn't even attach the bayonet. I had to do it for him. The sound of metal clashing together. Click was cold and decisive. It was the sound that marked the end of humanity. Now we were killing machines. Beep! A shrill whistle sounded. It was the loneliest sound in the world. Hundreds of soldiers simultaneously clung to the slipper, mud-covered wooden ladders. I climbed. The first moment you poke your head above the ground, you feel naked. No more earthen walls to protect you. Only the gray sky and the deathly field stretching before you. Charge! Shouts rang out, but they were quickly silenced. Tap, 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 tap. The German Maxim machine guns began to sing. Have you ever heard the sound of canvas tearing machine guns? Sounded exactly like that, but 1,000 times louder. I lunged forward, my feet slipping on the mud and bomb craters. Around me, comrades fell like wheat before a scythe. There was no heroism about it. They simply bent over while running, fell face down into the mud, and lay motionless. Some screamed for their mothers. Others died instantly in silence. I heard Thomas gasp behind me. Run, Thomas, don't stop, run in a zigzag pattern. I yelled, but the wind and the whistling bullets drowned it out. We had to get past the barbed wire fence. The artillery should have destroyed it, but they missed. The sharp barbed wire coils were still intact, strung across like a devil's spider web. I found a gap and crawled through my clothes ripped to shreds. I turned back to pull Thomas. He was trying to climb over, but his backpack was caught in the wire. He panicked, struggling harder and harder, only to be entangled more tightly. Help me, John! Help me! Thomas yelled, his eyes wide with terror. I lunged back, reaching out to cut the wire. But it was too late. A machine gun fire swept over our position. Bullets lodged in Thomas's chest, making him convulse like he'd been electrocuted. Blood gushed out, soaking his uniform. He looked at me one last time. That look. It wasn't fear anymore. It was surprise. As if he couldn't believe his life was ending here, hanging precariously on barbed wire like a tattered puppet. Thomas! I screamed, but a loud explosion flung me backward. I fell into a waterlogged bomb crater. The world went dark. I woke up, half my body submerged in icy, muddy water. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. I touched my face. It was wet. It was blood. But not my blood. It was Thomas's. I looked up at the edge of the crater. The gunfire had died down. The attack had failed. The survivors had retreated. I was left behind, alone, in the middle of a desolate wasteland. And the sun was setting. Darkness was descending. and with the darkness came the groans of thousands of dying people around me. And something else. I saw a yellowish-green smoke drifting slowly across the ground towards me. Poison gas. Have you ever tried putting a plastic bag over your head and attempting a marathon? If not, you'll never understand what it felt like wearing a gas mask in 1916. But at that moment, I had no choice. That yellowish-green cloud drifting towards me wasn't fog. It was death in vapor form. Chlorine. Or maybe phosgene. Or mustard. I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. I only knew that if I inhaled even one breath, my lungs would melt from the inside, and I would drown on dry land in my own lung fluid. My hands trembled as I tore open the mask pouch at my side. Hold your breath. Close your eyes. That's what I was trained to say. But when death is creeping closer, instinct makes you want to scream, to take a deep breath in panic. I pulled the foul-smelling rubber mask over my face. It was cold wet and reeked of preservatives. I tightened the straps around my head until it ached. Then I gasped. The rubber valve vibrated. Hiss. Hiss. My world shrank. I could no longer see the vast battlefield. My vision was limited by two opaque round panes of glass. I was like a blindfolded horse, seeing only the muddy bomb crater in front of me. The air inside the mask became stiflingly hot in just seconds. Condensation fogged the glass. I wanted to wipe it, but I couldn't. Absolutely not. I mustn't take it off. Outside the foggy glass, the yellow cloud had descended into the bomb crater. It was heavier than air, so it sought out the low-lying areas, exactly where I was lying. I was lying in the middle of an invisible pool of acid. I saw a rat scurry across my feet. It inhaled the toxic gas. It convulsed, hissing and thrashing blood, gushing from its nose and ears. I closed my eyes, listening to the sound of my own labored breathing echoing in my ears. Gasp. I was the only living creature still breathing here. Or was I already dead without knowing it? Night fell quickly, or perhaps the mask's visor was too dark. The poisonous cloud dissipated with the wind, or perhaps it had settled to the ground. I risked removing my mask. The first breath of air was thick with gunpowder and foul odors, yet strangely sweet. Now the land of no man appeared in its true form. Whoosh! Boom, a flare very light was fired from the German side. It hung suspended in the pitch-black sky, emitting an eerie white light swaying with the parachute. That light transformed the surrounding landscape into a surreal nightmare. Long shadows danced across the uneven ground. The charred tree stumps looked like bony arms reaching up from hell. And the corpses. In that pale light, I saw hundreds of my comrades' bodies. They lay scattered everywhere, some face down, some face up, some torn in half. Some died crawling, their hands still reaching for the trenches. They were no longer human. They were piles of blood-soaked rags. But the most terrifying thing about the night wasn't what you saw. It was what you heard. When the gunfire finally ceased, the symphony began. Save me. Mother. Water. Please give me water. Groans echoed from all directions. Thousands of whispers, cries, and screams of pain blended together into an incessant buzzing sound. These were the wounded, not yet dead. They lay there in the cold mud, waiting. Medic, stretcher bearer! A desperate cry rang out nearby, then faded into sobs. No medics came. No one dared come out here at night. The German snipers were waiting for any movement. I covered my ears. I didn't want to hear. I didn't want to know who was dying just meters away from me. I was a coward. I just wanted to live. But there was a voice I couldn't get out of my head. John? I jolted and turned. In the hallucinations of thirst and shock, I saw Thomas. He was still hanging from the barbed wire fence about 30 meters away from me. The wind was blowing, making his body sway gently. In the flickering flares, I swear I saw him waving at me. "You left me behind." The voice echoed in my head, clear and distinct. "I'm sorry, Thomas. I'm sorry." I mumbled, tears mixing with the mud on my face. "I couldn't save you. I had to go. If I stayed here until morning, the snipers would put a bullet in my head, or the artillery would plow up the rest of this land." I started crawling. I didn't dare stand up. I crawled belly up on the cold, slimy ground. Every meter I moved was torture. My body ached as if someone had hammered every fiber of my flesh, and I had to crawl past them. I couldn't avoid the corpses. The night was too dark, and they lay too close together. At times, my hand rested on something soft and wet. It was the belly of a soldier who had died a few days earlier, beginning to swell. At other times, I had to crawl over a pair of broken legs. I whispered, "Sorry, sorry, brother," whenever I accidentally touched them. I kept crawling towards the flashes of gunfire from my side. How long would it take? An hour? 2 hours or a lifetime? I didn't know. Suddenly, I heard a click, the sound of a machine gun being loaded. "Stop, who's there?" A voice snarled from the darkness ahead. English. It was one of our own guards. This was the most dangerous moment. These guards were on high alert. They were shooting at anything that moved. So many soldiers had crawled back here only to be shot dead by their own comrades, mistaken for German raiders. "Don't shoot 16th Division, I'm British." I tried to shout, but my throat was so dry it only produced a hoarse hiss. "Password!" The voice yelled. The machine gun barrel pointed directly at my face from the edge of the trench. Password. My mind went blank. What was the password today? King Queen London. I couldn't remember. I desperately raised my hands to the sky. "I'm John Miller. Please don't shoot." A deadly silence. The guard's finger rested on the trigger. Then a beam of flashlight shone directly into my face, blinding me. "Oh my God, look at this guy." A rough hand grabbed my collar and yanked me up. I fell with a thud to the bottom of the safe trench. I lay on my back, looking up at the starry night sky through the narrow gap in the trench. No more groaning. Only my own gasping breaths. I was alive. But when I reached up to my breast pocket, the letter Thomas had asked me to deliver to his mother, it wasn't there. I dropped it out there in hell. And then I burst into tears. Not from pain, but because I realized a part of my soul had died and remained out there forever with Thomas. They said the war was over. At the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. The gunfire ceased. Newspapers ran headlines, "Peace." People poured into the streets, dancing, cheering, and embracing strangers. But for me, and for people like me, that silence wasn't peace. It was torture. When the shelling stopped, the noise in my head truly began to scream. I stepped off the train at London Station. It was drizzling. Everything was the same. The red brick buildings, the double-decker buses, the men in suits going to work, the women carrying umbrellas. They looked at me, a soldier in a tattered uniform with sunken eyes and a limp. They smiled at me. A few children waved, "Hello, hero." Hero, I wanted to yell at them. I wanted to grab the collar of that fat cigar-smoking man and yell, "Do you know what I did? Do you know I had to step on my friend's face to climb out of the bomb crater, but I did nothing. I just nodded a crooked smile on my face. I felt like an alien, or rather, I was a ghost wandering among the living. They lived in a world of color, of the future of hope. And I still lived in the gray world of ash and death. I didn't belong here anymore. I went home. My mother sobbed when she saw me intact, albeit only outwardly. She prepared a hot meal for me, spread out pristine white sheets scented with lavender. The scent of lavender. It made me nauseous. It was too clean, too fragrant. It couldn't mask the lingering smell of rotting flesh in my nose. My first night at home, I lay on the comfortable bed. No rats. There was no mud. No gunfire. But I couldn't sleep. The silence in this bedroom was more terrifying than the land of no man, because in that silence I heard them. I closed my eyes, and I saw Thomas again. He was still hanging on the barbed wire fence, blood still dripping from his mouth, staring at me. "Why did you get back? Why you and not me?" I sprang up, drenched in sweat, instinctively reaching for my rifle. But my hand only touched the bedside lamp. It fell and shattered. My mother rushed in, panicked. "What's wrong, John?" It was just a dream. She hugged me like she used to when I was a child, but she didn't understand. It wasn't a dream. It was my reality. What was happening here, this room, this peace, was the deceptive dream. A week later, I mustered the courage to go see Thomas's mother. She lived in a small house on the outskirts of town. She looked 10 years older than the last time I saw her. How did he die?" she asked, her hands trembling as she poured tea. Her eyes filled with both hope and fear. Did he suffer? I looked into the mother's eyes. Should I tell her the truth? That her son died in utter panic? That he cried out her name as machine guns tore his body apart? That his corpse lay exposed food for crows and rats, that I had lost his last letter? No, I couldn't kill her again. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my flesh. He died very quickly, ma'am. A sniper bullet. Instantly. He didn't have time to feel any pain. He fought so bravely. He was a hero. She wept, but these were tears of comfort. Thank God. Thank you. I walked out of that house feeling like the worst man in the world. I had survived through cowardice, and now I was living on lies. I went to a pub. There I met other soldiers who had also just returned. We sat in a corner separated from the noisy crowd, celebrating the victory. We didn't say much, just looking into each other's eyes. A 1,000-yard stare was enough to understand. We drank to forget, but the alcohol didn't make us forget. It only made the ghosts more visible. A young man, probably never in battle, came up with a glass of beer and patted me on the shoulder. "Hey buddy, tell us about your exploits. How many Germans did you kill? What did it feel like to stab the enemy with a bayonet? It must have been glorious, right?" The whole pub fell silent, waiting for an eloquent answer. My hand trembled, and the beer spilled onto the table. I looked at the young man, at his eager, naive, almost foolish face. "Glory," I whispered. I remembered Miller's mangled face. I remembered the crackling of bones under tank wheels, Suras. I remembered the cries of children in the burnt villages. "You want to know what it feels like?" I stood up, my voice trembling. "It feels like you wish you died with them, so you wouldn't have to sit here and listen to these stupid questions." I walked away, leaving him stunned. Years have passed. I've grown old. I've married, had children. I've tried to live a normal life. But not a single night has I slept soundly. People say World War I was the war to end all wars. How ridiculous. It was only the beginning. It taught humanity how to kill each other more efficiently, more ruthlessly. You ask me about a terrible day in the trenches. My answer is the trenches are no longer in France or Belgium. They're here, in my head. Every time it rains, I smell the mud. Every time I hear thunder, I want to crawl under the table. We, the generation of 1914, we didn't come back. We died there at Somme, at Verdun, at Ypres. These people walking, breathing, talking are just empty shells. Thomas, wait for me. I'm coming to see you soon, and this time I won't run away.